Uber's offering free rides to state-approved evacuation shelters. The company says it would offer the free rides of up to $20 to and from the shelters. All you have to do is enter the promo code DORIAN Relief in your app where you see add promo code. Uber says that could change when Dorian arrives.
Up next on Wink News this morning at 5, we have a brand new track for Hurricane Dorian. Meteorologist Matt Devitt and our entire Weather Authority meteorologist team are analyzing the information. They'll have the latest track for you next.
Also ahead on Wink News this morning at 5 o'clock, hurricane watches and warnings are extending all along the East Coast. Still ahead, what businesses are doing to prepare for the storm.
Breaking news, a brand new forecast track for major Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah, take a look at this advisory we got just about 10 minutes ago. This storm, as you probably know by now, it is moving super slow. It's been pounding the Bahamas for 24 hours. We have coast-to-coast team coverage. Let's start with meteorologist Matt Devitt. And Matt, the big question everybody wants to know, when is this thing going to turn?
And I know the million-dollar question is, will it turn? You want to know my answer? It will. And I know when you initially hear that, you're probably thinking, all right, buddy, are you sure? I promise, you have my word, it will turn towards the north. Right now, like Lindsay and Corey were saying, 1 mile per hour, literally you can walk faster than Dorian as it is slowly working its way across Grand Bahama. The sustained winds, 165. It is still a Category 5, the pressure at 916 millibars. But the plan has not changed. This is going to be taking a turn towards the north. It has been consistent with that forecast over the past 2 days. So, and basically when it starts to slow down, that's almost one of the first signs that it will be eventually taking that turn towards the north. And eventually, as we hit the, let's say Thursday, Friday, and Saturday time frame, it races towards the northeast. So here's a zoomed in view of the tropical tracker. Right now a 5, then a 4, then a 3, but it becomes a bigger storm, especially later down the road. Now you also will notice that the Florida East Coast, they are not in the clear. They still need to watch it, and there are at least a few scenarios that either have it making landfall very quickly and kind of skimming the East Coast, or it stays offshore. But even with that situation, the Florida East Coast could see a scenario very similar to Hurricane Matthew in 2016, where with that storm, they still had surge. They still had some strong wind and some heavy rain. So here's going to be the bottom line. What are we going to see? And we will see in addition to some rain and some wind, not much. Scattered showers and storms, breezy to occasionally windy with gusts 25 to 35 miles an hour. I will say there is a slight chance for an isolated tornado or two. We're going to have a little bit more spin in the atmosphere, but the track will turn north, and that is going to happen tonight into tomorrow morning as we will be dodging a bullet here in Southwest Florida. The intensity, no question, right now it's a 5. It's powerful, but I do expect some slow and gradual weakening as the system gets bigger over the next few days. But here's going to be the well-defined eye, 20 miles in diameter, as well as the strongest part of the storm right here, and that is where we would likely have the 165 mile per hour wind. In reference to us, you'd never believe it as you step outside, 225 miles to our east, there's a Category 5. A few isolated showers for this morning, and then we would see the extreme outer bands on the western periphery as we hit this afternoon and also into the early evening. Scattered off and on, breezy to at times windy. Temperatures for today, get this, actually hot, lower 90s with the wind, but I've got you covered with Dorian's track and your 10-day all ahead.
All right, thanks, Matt, and good Monday morning. Well, as of right now, because of the storm being around the East Coast, more towards that way, they have suspended the toll plaza there. This is mile marker 101 towards Alligator Alley, so heading over to that East Coast, you won't have to worry about paying the toll. Also, on our maps, if you are heading out in Naples, it is a little congested already on Airport Pulling, heading north of the East Trail towards Davis Boulevard. The average speed about 19 miles per hour, so a little slow, but we're up to speed on Immokalee Road, heading west of 75 towards 41. As of right now, should only take you about 5 minutes. That's your week news traffic.
And here at the Live Center, making a track of how the Bahamas are doing after Dorian went through the Abaca Islands. Look at this devastation. This is what people are having to pick up this morning. And the thing is, as Matt just told you, it's not as if Dorian has moved away. They're still having to deal with this while Dorian is still doing this to other parts of the island. Look at this, just water submerged, trees toppled, houses filled with water. So much devastation. You can see exactly how strong those winds and waves were from Dorian yesterday on Abaca Islands. And let me show you where everything is. You see that even on Google Maps, it shows you that Hurricane Dorian is here on Grand Bahama just yesterday here, Abaca Island. So it hasn't moved very much, and now they're still dealing with destruction in the Bahamas, even though Abaca now has the responsibility of picking up the pieces this morning. In Florida, hurricane watches and warnings, they extend from the Jupiter Inlet all the way up to the Florida-Georgia line. That is more than 300 miles of coastline. Wink News reporter Andrea Henderson's live from Daytona Beach, where mandatory evacuations for certain areas are going to start in just 5 hours.
Well, Lindsay, you might be able to see or maybe even hear it picking up in my mic, but the winds are already starting to pick up here at Daytona Beach, and we're actually a little bit ways back from the shore. But you can see businesses here boarded up all across the board. And for ones that haven't boarded up yet, well, time is really ticking because that mandatory evacuation goes into effect for this beachside community starting at 10 this morning. Now, most restaurants and shops not taking any chances. For everyone still open, there's just as many, if not more, closed down, lights off. Now, we watched some of the bars on the beach board up their windows yesterday. They still plan to get a few more hours of business in, but really they know their time is limited.
We're going to be closed until we know which path the hurricane's going to go in, and depending on how much it hits us here.
We really don't know when we're going to close or anything like that, but we're just trying to make sure everything's boarded up and secure so nothing happens, hopefully.
And once they do board up, many don't really know when exactly they'll be able to come back, but they do expect maybe at Wednesday at some point. Of course, all of that's still up in the air. Live on Daytona Beach, Andrea Henderson, Wink News now.
And Dorian could still force school districts here in Southwest Florida to close tomorrow. We're watching this very closely for you. Right now, we're waiting for Lee, Charlotte, and Collier County school districts to make their decisions. They plan to do that today. Meanwhile, Glades and Hendry counties, FSW and FGCU are all closed tomorrow. And if a district does close tomorrow, you'll know about it first on the Wink News app.
Another big concern, Lake Okeechobee could rise by as much as 3.5 feet from all of Dorian's rain. The Army Corps says the Herbert Hoover Dike is safe and will hold. Wink News reporter Nicole Lauren continues our team coverage this morning live from Lake O in Clewiston.
Lindsay, well, people living in this area definitely anxious to see how much rain this monster storm will bring along with it. And as Dorian inches closer and closer to the East Coast, they tell us all eyes are on Lake O.
I always think about that particularly, but right now I don't have any real serious concerns about it.
But while some are prepping for the worst, the Army Corps and the South Florida Water Management District stand confident there will be no failure or any overwash of the Herbert Hoover Dike. With high flood risks and water quality concerns, officials stress they're ready and they've been prepping for this storm.
The canal levels are all lowered, and we will continue to lower them, but they're where they need to be right now. So we feel very prepared to take on the rainfall associated with this tropical system.
So the Army Corps also told us after that storm passes, it's going to take about a week or so for this basin to drain. After that, they're going to measure how much rain they got here, and then they'll decide what to do next with releases. In Clewiston, Nicole Lauren, Week News Now.
At 10 o'clock this morning, Governor Ron DeSantis will give us an update on statewide preparations for Hurricane Dorian. Week News will carry that on air. We'll also stream it live on the Week News app for you. And last night, the governor urged people along the state's east coast to listen to all the evacuation orders and the warnings, as the Category 5 storm could be destructive there.
This storm at this magnitude could really cause massive destruction, and do not put your life in jeopardy by staying behind when you have a chance to get out.
9 counties all along the East Coast have announced mandatory evacuation orders so far.
The governor of Georgia is also ordering people to evacuate. Governor Brian Kemp declared a state of emergency last night. He also ordered a mandatory evacuation for 6 counties along the coast. That order goes into effect today at noon.
Voluntary evacuations are in place in Southwest Florida. Coming up on Week News this morning at 5, we'll take you live to where shelters have actually opened overnight, plus how locals are helping people escaping the East Coast, and what Dorian is doing to transportation this long holiday weekend.
And speaking of the Category 5 storm, here's a look at it on Miami Doppler radar. You can see the eye and the eye wall. Why the system will turn, it will, is coming out.
Right now, I want to take you live now at Cocoa Beach in Brevard County. Pretty decently smooth out there. The winds have picked up a little bit. Mandatory evacuations for low-lying areas of the county have already been issued this morning as the East Coast braces for possible impacts of Hurricane Dorian. But here is again a live look at the Cocoa Beach Pier. I want to bring in meteorologist Matt Devitt now. Matt, you just got that new track at 5 o'clock this morning. What do you make of this storm so far? It's still very powerful, moving very slow.
That's right. There are actually some pros and cons with that forward progress, or I guess you could say lack thereof. Obviously, let's talk about the negative. The northern part of the Bahamas, they're going to have to deal with this system, and they have been dealing with this system for 24 to 36 hours, battling a monster Category 5 with heavy rain, damaging wind, and storm surge. But at least for us in Southwest Florida, the fact that it is slowing down, that helps us out. It allows the system to wait until there's a weakness with the ridge towards the north to take that turn towards the north as well. And that is why for us, we dodge a bullet and it will avoid our area. I promise you it will. Now, for our friends along the Florida East Coast, different story. They're still in the cone. They still got to watch it. And there is the possibility that the Florida East Coast either gets skirted by the storm, could even briefly make landfall, or it stays just offshore. But for us in Southwest Florida, this is not a storm that we will see a direct impact from. Look at the forward progress. 1 miles an hour. And in fact, with that slow forward progress, eventually that is kind of one of the early signs that the system is going to be taking that turn. Sustained winds still a Category 5 at 165. You can see the well-defined eye and eye wall. There is where we would have likely the 165 in the northeastern quadrant of Dorian. This is where the strongest winds would be. Notice the diameter of the eye about 20 miles wide, and already some of the outer bands have pushed on shore for West Palm Beach and extending towards Fort Pierce. And actually for us, as we plan out your Labor Day, a few showers possible for this morning, but the best opportunity for Dorian's outer bands would be during the afternoon and early evening hours, off and on and scattered. If you missed this earlier on in the show, because Dorian is going to bring a higher wind field than normal up above our heads, there's going to be a little bit of spin in the atmosphere, and there is going to be at least a slight chance for an isolated tornado or two. It's not impossible. So let me show you the scenarios once again. If the Euro and the American are correct, and we're going to have to see, I'll show you the variations here, but if the American is correct, that means that the Florida East Coast could see wind gusts 60 to 100 miles an hour, Lake Okeechobee 35 to 55, and for us in Southwest Florida, 25 to 35 mile per hour wind gusts. And then eventually it takes that turn more towards the northeast. The expected rainfall totals, not bad. We'll take that. 1/2 inch to 2.5 inches, 1 to 3 for Lake Okeechobee, and 3 to 10 for the Florida East Coast. Now, as we take a look at the European model, the wind gusts 50 to 80 miles an hour, but every single mile makes all the difference in the world for what they could see along the East Coast. But you got to keep in mind, even with this scenario, they would see a storm surge because of the wind coming in from the Atlantic before eventually getting drawn back out. Lake Okeechobee, wind gusts 30 to 50. And notice how the Southwest Florida wind forecast almost identical to the American model as well. The rainfall, only 1/2 inch to 2 inches for us, 1 to 3 for Lake O, and 3 to 7 along the Florida East Coast. So here's a look at your 10-day forecast. Let's put it all together. And for today, scattered showers and storms, 92 degrees, as we would have some breezy to occasionally windy weather all the way towards your Tuesday and your Wednesday. A lingering breeze by Thursday, 90 degrees, and then goodbye Dorian. For late week all the way towards the weekend, temperatures hot and humid into the 90s, the heat index over 100. But we're going to have complete team coverage on Dorian ahead within the next few minutes. Sabrina?
Labor Day on Matt's forecast there, which means traffic is a little lighter than usual today. This is a look at Daniels Parkway heading west of JetBlue Park. You can see it is very quiet compared to usual. So if you are heading out this way, no worries. Some slowdowns though in Fort Myers on Treeline heading north towards Daniels. Average speed about 20 miles per hour heading northbound for a 1/2 mile. Slowdowns as well on Treeline heading north towards Colonial. And some gas prices. There are still some gas stations out there that don't have gas, but the Shell at Colonial and Evans has gas and is charging $2.36. The 7-Eleven at Colonial and Colonial Country Club Boulevard, $2.39 a gallon. And in Estero, the Shell at Miramar Outlet and Corkscrew Road charging $2.45. The True Week News traffic.
Well, to make it easier for people to evacuate the East Coast, the state has suspended tolls on major roads, including Alligator Alley, the Turnpike, and the Sawgrass Expressway. He's also directed state transportation officials to monitor traffic flow as well. Now, as far as East Coast airports, Fort Lauderdale International as well as Palm Beach International will close today. Miami International is closely monitoring the storm and will close if necessary. As far as us here in Southwest Florida, everything remains open. And as far as cruise ships go, the Port of Miami is closed until further notice, as well as Port Canaveral. So cruises expected to leave this week are canceled, and those supposed to return back are actually delaying that process.
Starting today, Verizon and AT&T are opening up their services for customers in the path of Dorian. If Verizon's your provider, the company's giving you unlimited calling, data, and texting for the next week. AT&T announced it's waiving data overages fees for you until Sunday. Comcast Infinity is also opening up their network of almost 200,000 Wi-Fi hotspots throughout Florida as well, all free of charge.
All right, so you're probably waking up this morning wondering, has that turn happened yet? You're saying it's going to turn. We're talking about Hurricane Dorian, but I think when is the big question.
You know, there are going to be, I believe, some false wobbles over the next several hours.
Okay.
And when they see the wobble,
So
they're
don't
thinking,
panic.
is it going to turn? Is it going to turn? So we're likely going to have some wobbles over the next few hours, and you may have actually seen that in the few latest scans. But the big turn, the all-important turn, according to the American and the Euro model, that happens tonight and into tomorrow morning. So as we take a look at the GO-16 satellite, no question, you can see this Category 5 working its way across Grand Bahama. Here's a look at the Dorian wind field, 250 miles wide in diameter of tropical storm force winds. The hurricane force winds in red, that is 75 miles wide. So here's a look at the stats. Very, very slowly moving towards the west at 1. The sustained winds, 165 miles an hour. It actually peaked at 185, the strongest that the northern Bahamas had ever seen on record in modern history. The pressure at 916 millibars, and here's going to be again the forecast cone. Every single mile makes all the difference for what the Florida East Coast will see. Obviously, if it gets closer, if not makes landfall, they could see a significant influence with strong damaging winds, power outages, heavy rainfall, and a storm surge. And in fact, this track is very, very similar to what occurred with Hurricane Matthew in 2016. So there's going to be the eye. And look at that. This is a multiple hour time lapse, and it has barely moved. Can you imagine that with a powerful Category 5? Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, and Naples right now dry at the moment. Do have some spotty showers along the East Coast, but we got a lot to cover here with the Wink Weather Team. And next up is going to be meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees. Brittany?
Yeah, Matt, you talked about the close proximity. It's only about 230 miles east of us here in Southwest Florida, but of course, we're not dealing with a lot of this. These are watches and warnings expanding for the entire state of Florida. Let's zoom in now. So first, this is the big one, the hurricane warning. This expands from areas near Melbourne and north all the way down just north of Miami. That, of course, with hurricane conditions expected within a 36-hour period. Also areas just south of there for West Palm, all the way just north of Fort Lauderdale, a hurricane watch, which means that those conditions are possible. That also heads up towards Daytona Beach and all the way up towards the northeast quadrant there of the state of Florida. Then we have tropical storm warnings in effect for other areas that are expecting those tropical storm force conditions, but not quite to the hurricane standpoint. And this is probably one of our biggest expansion ones, is the tropical storm watch all the way from Jacksonville down just to the east and north there of Fort Myers. That's because the tropical storm force conditions are possible. We could see the wind possible to that extent, and that does include parts of our viewing area like Lake Okeechobee and over toward Lake Placid and areas of Highlands County. Now, something else that these areas will really have to keep a very close eye on, of course, is that storm surge, especially for the immediate coast with this storm surge warning in effect. Like Matt mentioned earlier, it looks to be continuing to take a path similar to Hurricane Matthew, which many areas along the coast did see some roadways washed away, including A1A for a lot of areas there east of I-95.
And it is a very quiet morning traffic-wise. If you're heading out in Cape Coral, this is a look at Del Prado heading south towards Cape Parkway. A lot quieter than it usually is. So if you are heading out here, great option for right now, guys. Slowdowns, though, if you're in Cape Coral on Surfside, and this is going to be traveling south of Gleason, heading down towards Beach Parkway. The average speed has been about 17 miles per hour. But we're great if you're heading over into Fort Myers right now on the Midpoint Bridge as well as the Cape Coral Bridge. Should only take you about 2 minutes to get into town. That's your news traffic.
The evacuees are coming to Southwest Florida to escape the storm. Coming up, how hotels in the area are working to accommodate everyone. And if you're just joining us this morning, take a look at this latest advisory that came out just about 20 minutes ago. You can see Hurricane Dorian still slowly moving towards Florida's east coast, but going to make that hook and turn north. And right now is a great reminder, because I know it is the Labor Day weekend. Download the free Wink Weather app, because not only are we keeping a track on Dorian, here's where you can see your hourly forecast for today, since most of you will be off today.
At this hour, evacuees from the East Coast are flocking to Southwest Florida for safety. In fact, hotels in Collier County are rapidly filling up this morning, and some places are waiving cancellation fees just to help those moving away from the storm. People in the hotel business say at this point, it's not about turning a profit.
We decided that, in a time like this, it's not really fair to charge people for something that's so unpredictable and out of control.
And what we're just focusing on is making sure our guests are feeling relaxed and stress-free, especially those with families.
And some hotels say people were canceling their reservations last week because of Hurricane Dorian. Now they're expected to be nearly full today and tomorrow.
And many of you staying here have very different plans when it comes to preparing for Dorian. This home here has a full pantry stocked, a line of batteries, even overflowing tool shed, as you can see. But for others of you, well, you're taking advantage of the holiday weekend by going to the beach. Families tell us they're taking it day by day, but will enjoy the beach while there's less travelers and less traffic.
Here on the East Coast, it's the calm before the storm. I'm in Titusville with the final steps of preparation for many families and businesses.
And if you are just waking up and joining us this morning, here is the latest 5 a.m. track for Hurricane Dorian. It has slowed down considerably at 1 mile per hour this morning. It's right over the Bahamas, so they're experiencing devastating conditions. And I know we've been telling you this a lot, but go ahead and download the Wink News app because we sent you an alert right at 5 o'clock telling you that meteorologist Matt Devitt is anticipating that turn of Hurricane Dorian. You'll receive notifications just like this on your phone the second anything changes with this hurricane. Wink News is the Weather Authority.